Hello everyone. The Bible is a book that we all know about and most of us have read. It contains stories that happened in the past, tales of people who lived long before our time. While some may argue that it's just an old book filled with outdated morals and teachings, it's hard to deny that there are some genuinely interesting stories within its pages. From tales of talking snakes to accounts of people being swallowed by fish, the Bible has some pretty wild stories. But those are nothing compared to the darkest stories of the Bible that no one wants to tell you about. Today we're going to be discussing the hidden and sometimes disturbing truths from these stories that most people don't know about or choose to ignore. So grab your thinking caps and get ready for a ride. We begin with the story of Job. Job was a righteous man who was tested by God. Satan came to God and said that Job only worshipped him because God had blessed him with wealth, health, and children. So God allowed Satan to test Job by taking away everything he had, including his health and killing his children. Job was left with nothing but his faith in God. Despite all this, he did not curse God. In fact, he maintained his innocence and asked God why he was suffering so much. God responded by asking Job rhetorical questions about nature and told him that he couldn't understand God's ways. Ultimately, Job was rewarded with double the amount of wealth and more children than before. But the story doesn't end there. Job was still angry at God and wanted to know why he was chosen for such cruel treatment. God responded by threatening Job with death if he kept questioning him. And even after Job repented, God still threatened him again. This shows that God can be unforgiving and even violent towards those who question him. But let's move on to the next story, that of Abraham and Isaac. In Genesis chapter 22, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his only son Isaac as a burnt offering. Abraham followed God's instructions and bound Isaac on the altar, ready to kill him. Just when he was about to make the sacrifice, an angel stopped him and told him that God had accepted his faith in obedience and that he would not allow him to kill Isaac. God then provided a ram to sacrifice instead of his son. While this story may seem like a testament to Abraham's faith, it also reveals God's willingness to test his followers to their limits and his lack of remorse when they obey him. He didn't seem to care that Abraham almost killed his only child and continued to ask for the impossible even after he had shown his faith. Now let's look at the story of Moses and the Israelites. Exodus tells the story of how Moses led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. God spoke too. Moses threw a burning bush and told him to go to Pharaoh and demand that he free the Israelites from their bondage. However, Pharaoh refused, and God punished Egypt with 10 plagues, including turning water into blood, causing boils to break out on people and animals, killing all the firstborn sons of Egypt. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh finally agreed to let the Israelites go. But just as they were leaving, Pharaoh changed his mind and sent his army to chase them down. The Israelites fled, and God parted the Red Sea so they could escape. However, when the Egyptians tried to follow them, God caused the sea to crash down, killing them all. While this story is often seen as a heroic tale of freedom and liberation, it also depicts God as a vengeful and merciless deity who is willing to kill anyone who gets in the way of his plans. He showed no mercy to the Egyptians, even though they were not the ones who had enslaved the Israelites. Next, we have the story of David and Goliath. This well-known story from 1 Samuel is often used to teach people about facing their fears and standing up to bullies. David, a young shepherd, volunteered to fight the giant Goliath, who had been taunting the Israelites. Armed with only a sling and 5 stones, David defeated Goliath by striking him in the forehead with one of the stones. While this story is inspiring, it also raises questions about the Israelites' belief system. They seem to believe that fighting in wars was wrong, and that their enemies should be defeated without violence. If they truly believed that, why were they afraid of Goliath? Was it because they didn't believe in their God, or didn't think he would help them? Why did they allow themselves to be intimidated by a single opponent? These are disturbing questions that challenge the image of the Israelites as a peaceful and devout people. Moving on, we have the story of Solomon and the baby. In Kings 3, Solomon woke up in the middle of the night and saw a baby lying on his bed crying. At first he assumed that God had brought the baby to him to take away. But then a messenger arrived saying that 2 women claiming to be the mother of the living baby had come to him for help. Solomon instructed that the baby be brought before him, and he devised a plan to determine the real mother. He ordered that the baby be cut in half and given to each woman. The true mother, who loved her child more than anything, begged Solomon to reconsider, offering to give up her claim to the baby rather than see it harmed. Touched by her compassion, Solomon realized that she was the real mother and returned the unharmed baby to her. This story reveals a disturbing side of Solomon, showing that he was capable of extreme measures to solve problems. He was willing to kill an innocent baby simply to determine who the real mother was. It raises questions about the morality of his actions and whether he really needed to go to such extreme lengths. Now let's look at the story of Elisha and the Shunammite woman. In 2 Kings 4, a Shunammite woman asked the prophet Elisha to help her husband, who was in debt and unable to pay back his loans. Elisha told her to collect the vessels of every household in the city and sell them. She would then use the money to pay off her husband's debts and still have some left over. As instructed, she gathered many vessels and sold them, returning home with sacks of silver. Her son, however, found the money and, thinking it was cursed, threw it into the floor, where it disappeared into a hole. When Elisha heard about this, he went to the woman and asked her how much money she had received. When she told him, he instructed her to gather the same number of vessels and fill them with oil. He then took a vial and poured the oil into it, which multiplied until the vessels were full to the brim. Elisha then instructed her to sell the oil and use the money to pay her debts and support her and her son. This story has many disturbing aspects to it. Firstly, the Shunammite woman's son thought that the money was cursed, which implies that there is a possibility that the money actually was cursed. Secondly, Elisha's solution to the problem involved using magic-like abilities to multiply the oil and then using it to make more money. This suggests that the story may have elements of black magic or dark sorcery. Finally, the story implies that those who deal with cursed objects or supernatural powers are likely to face negative consequences. Lastly, let's discuss the story of Amnon and Tamar. In 2 Samuel 13, Amnon, the son of David, became infatuated with his sister Tamar and desired to sleep with her. Unable to control his urges, he tricked her into believing that his brother Absalom had sent her a message and assaulted her. Afterward, he sent her away, and she was forced to become a prostitute. Distraught by what had happened, Tamar's only option was to flee and find refuge with her grandfather, who she hadn't seen since she was 2 years old. Amnon's actions were not only heinous, but also disturbing in their callousness. He not only violated his sister, but also destroyed her life by forcing her into prostitution. This story paints a grim picture of the lengths to which unchecked desire can lead and the devastating consequences it can have on innocent lives. So there you have it, some of the darkest stories from the Bible that most people don't know about or choose to ignore. These stories offer a glimpse into the hidden truths of the Bible and raise questions about the nature of God and the morality of certain practices. It's important to remember that these stories are not intended to promote hatred or division, but rather to encourage critical thinking and open discussions about faith and religion. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.